Welcome to Unmuted Nation. It is a Monday, and a lot of us are coming off of a rough weekend, a rough time for a lot of people, and a really frustrating time for a lot of people in America. Black people more than anything, and I think that um, at Unmuted Nation we at Unmuted Nation with never without technical difficulties. Okay, all right, here we go. I think we're back. Um, I'm all about improvising. Unmuted Nation, we're all about having the conversation. And if you are, all right, guys, I'm listening to you. And all right, we're good. If you listen to Unmuted Nation during the day, if you are part of the podcast or part of the conversations that we are always about having the conversations that matter. Having the conversations, not just here, but conversations that you take back to your friends and to your family, to the brunch table, to the dinner table. Having these conversations with each other is really what matters. And right now, the country is having a conversation that I think that I personally think that Black people should be leading this conversation. There are a lot of voices in this, and that may even be offensive to some white people that are advocates or allies. And I don't want you to be offended, but I do want you to listen. So tonight we're going to have, and for the rest of the week, we're going to do some things a little bit differently. We have kind of conversation right now. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of angst. And then we are a lot of us are waiting for guidance from, and maybe we're getting it from places we shouldn't be getting it from pastors, from not to say that pastors are the wrong place, but mouthpieces that really don't know anything about the fight or the culture. And so while our culture has definitely been under attack for longer than most people would like to admit, and the pain and the agony and so much of the frustration roots much deeper than we're really ready to ever acknowledge with each other. I think if we don't strategize and find a way to have these conversations, lead these conversations and step up and make moves in this movement, we'll find ourselves having the same conversations in the same frustration in the same place, and just repeating a cycle that we don't really have to repeat. In my Facebook today, there were a few people that shared this memory, which brought it to my memory, and I didn't really even remember this incident just 5 years ago. Many of us were having the same conversation. There was an incident in Texas where a police officer held down a young Black girl with his knee on her body and pinned her down while her friends and they were just playing at the pool. They were questioned and their Black bodies were attacked. In the same week in Texas, there were 16 white men arrested by the police, not even white men, white young boys arrested by the police and sitting peacefully on a curb. And that same conversation that we were having 5 years ago. So many of you missed it. So many of you were not having that conversation or not aware of that. And you're Googling now, like trying to figure out what was that and when did that happen and how did that happen and how did we miss that? But a lot of people have been missing this for longer than we are willing to admit. It hasn't been forever that we've had cameras that document everything. It hasn't been forever that we had video cameras that can collect situations and connect the dots for many people that just refuse to believe that a certain problem exists. Now that we have these things, we still have people refusing to acknowledge them. We have people refusing to acknowledge that there is a systemic problem that has affected a specific community that should be free, just like everyone else in this country. And there's just a refusal there. I think all of that is part of the system. And I've never been one to shy away from understanding that while the system may be broken, this system was actually designed this way. So we're not really fighting a system that's broken and that was that at one point worked for everyone and now it doesn't. We're fighting against a system that was designed this way and it's functioning as it was designed. And so dismantle a system of policing and not just policing, but brutality against Black bodies takes more than chatter. It takes more than just protesting in the streets. And I know that we're all excited and ready and willing to do that. But it also takes more than performance. And I don't think that many of us are, and I understand, what I do understand is that there's so much anger, so much frustration, and so many people that are realizing that this is a serious problem for the first time. And I'm not just talking about young people. I'm talking about people that are 40 and 50 that have lived in this country and thought in so many ways that we were past this, or because they were past it, they would not be affected by this type of crime or this type of. It's really crime that black bodies are facing, but so many people that are disconnected from it. And recent incidents have shown not just people like you, but people like everywhere that are in Black and brown skin, that they could be victims of this very easily. And so I've tried to take my time with this. I've been skeptical to come back to not just my show, but even say, and I've said a lot of things, and I've typed a lot of things, I've posted a lot of things, and I just haven't been ready to speak on it. I don't think that I've been in the right headspace. I don't think that, and I have vocalized this often, I don't think it's healthy or normal for people to see themselves brutalized. I don't think that it's normal for a Black person to see themselves under attack, whether it's an arrest, some type of beating, some type of pain on TV, on social media, in your text messages. You can't escape it. And what that does to the Black body, aside from desensitizing them, there's much trauma that these people, and not just when I say these people, I mean my people, that we carry. And it's hard to accept that. And so we're going to have the conversation tonight, and we'll have the conversation. As always, I'll convene the cabinet, and we will have this conversation with a multitude of people that are interested in change, people that I think have great minds and are open to just options and solutions. And I think while we can argue and disagree on certain things, I believe that if we don't get on the same page, this is something that won't change. And despite people having rallies and mayors dancing with their citizens and police officers shaking hands and little kids hugging police officers, after all of that, they are still killing us. And so if we don't discuss the problem and not and we have to, like, marginal progress is just not progress. We've had lip service for a long time, and that's what a lot of people have complained about. And so without delaying that, Jasmine Henley Brown is here with me, and Jeff Perkins is here as well. You guys welcome them both to Unmuted Nation.
Good evening.
Hey, Jazz.
Hey.
And Jeff.
Hello.
Hey, Jeff, what's going on? All right, so
How's it going?
Jeff, Jeff, both great minds. Jazz has been to Unmuted Nation before. Jeff, this is your first time. Hopefully you come back. Some of the things that are really, really like in the news heavily, and I just want to jump, like, I'm not going to take this whole hour and talk about what police brutality is. I think America they understand that now. If they are ignoring it, or that's their decision that they're making, for government officials that are saying that it's not real, it's not systemic, it's not a problem, that's BS that we don't have to address. But what we can address, and I think what I want us to look at, is some of the solutions that are being proposed, and how what I hope to achieve. And I know we won't solve it tonight, but I think over some time with the right voices, and I've seen so many skeptics, and so I'm trying to get in front of the skepticism, because there are so many people that see what's happening right now and have been in this fight before, or have been a part of something like this before, and they just feel like it's circling the drain. And if we don't do something or have some conversations quickly, we're going to lose this once again. And so one of the most notable things, I think, that, and Jazz, we had some time to talk about it earlier today. You actually called me first thing this morning, and your question to me was defunding the police. Like, defunding the police, what is that? Why would we suggest that? And is that even feasible?
It was abolishing the police.
Abolishing the police.
That was the question, yeah. Yeah.
Abolishing the police. So, from what you had heard about abolishing the police, and even what you shared, some of the things that you shared with me, I hadn't even heard. What were your initial thoughts with that?
So, um, to my understanding, what abolition means is to completely get rid of something. And I will be the first person to admit I'm not fully knowledgeable on this, which is part of the reason why I called you to kind of discuss exactly what this means because I'm still not clear because I've been seeing kind of like conflicting reports on what it actually means as it pertains to what they're asking to do with the police. And so to my understanding, of what the word abolish and abolition means is to completely get rid of something. And so my question to you was, well, I think there are still crimes that we would need some type of law enforcement for. Like I don't want to completely have local policing, which is also an alternative that I've seen on social media is that we would have local and community policing. And while I think that will work in certain situations, I don't know that that works in all situations. And so I was kind of looking for the nuance and why is it one extreme as far as just completely getting rid of the police if that's actually what people mean when they say abolish the police. So I'm still looking for clarity on what it actually means before I can form a solid opinion. I have an opinion based on what I think it means, but I'm definitely open to understanding exactly what people mean by that.
Sure. Jeff, when you first heard, and I saw a little bit of your live earlier today, a lot of people are, and I've seen them both now today, abolish the police, defund the police. What we know is that a change does need to happen with the police. We need some sort of change. We need to make some type of adjustments. What people are frustrated for, I think we're hearing this now because for so long, every time something happens and an officer, even if the officer is arrested and then acquitted, we then hear that we'll get more police training and we will work on training the police better. And then 2 weeks later, it happens again. We have another hashtag. So when you hear defund the police, Jeff, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
It's funny. My initial reflex was like, oh yeah, like that's great. You know what I mean? Until I actually looked up what defund meant, and I'm not in agreement with like making the police budget zero, right? So like I think that there is a tactful approach to reform that doesn't exist in this extreme, right? And you know, I share Jazz's sentiment, and I don't want to live in a society where we don't have like trained law enforcement, right? Like there will still be murders, there will still be rapes, there will still be carjackers, and I still want to be able to call 911 for an actual trained law enforcement officer to show up on the scene, So I
Right.
think that
So
our
I
desire,
guess,
go
and
ahead.
I think most logical people are of that thought, right? We need some type
Hmm.
of person to come and enforce said laws. But what does like how do we get there when we and that this is what you will hear from one side. We have tried to get there multiple times. We have replaced and I've always been one to say it's not white officers. The problem is not white officers. The implicit bias exists in officers, period. There's like some type of train. To me, more training means more training on how to kill black people because that's what keeps happening. And I don't think that that's what we want. I don't think that these departments go into this thinking that black people are more aggressive or that black people are the ones that need to go. But if we are going to start with some sort of training, where does that begin? And I think, in my view, I think it starts somewhere between voting and ensuring that we are appointing the right people to office to kind of put these people in place. Um, but if that's not the answer, is there another?
I
This
mean,
is for okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
we talked about you and I, Alex, the term that you can serve as a police commissioner, police chief. What's the correct term that I'm looking for?
The term limits. That's right.
Right, but I'm saying, is it the commissioner or the chief? Are they the same thing? Are they different?
No, so you in some places you have a police commissioner and a police chief. They're not always the same thing. You don't always have both.
So the person who is the head of the cops, I think they need to have a lot more variation with that person. As you and I were talking about, there shouldn't be the same person in that position for 20 years. No official in any capacity should be serving for that long, because what you do at some point is you lose touch and you get stuck in your ways. We've seen this time and time again. We talk about how our parents are just who they are because of their age. And imagine them doing the same job for 20, 30 years. They're going to continue to do the job pretty closely to the way that they have always done it. And so I think it starts there. I mean, voting, yes, but the only thing with voting is you never know a person's true intention. And people will say anything to get a vote. And so while that is really important, I don't know that that's the ultimate solution.
Jeff, what do you think?
In terms of training or in terms of voting?
I guess training and voting, and then we'll kind of pivot, because I think that there's this in this specific situation. I think it's more complicated than even what we're looking at it, because we are in an election year. Everything is politically charged and motivated, and a lot of words are really, really charged. So on both sides, from people that are either not acknowledging this or think that there's nothing wrong with the police, and then we know that historically, the GOP always runs on control and order and keeping things in line. So with this happening at this time, this is a ripe it's a ripe environment for people that kind of believe that way or ascribe to the views of a lot of conservatives to jump on a bandwagon and rally their way, to the polls in November.
Yeah, I think it's an intricate dance that politicians are going to have to do, specifically Democrats who are going to try to run on some type of reform or police reform platform. Because on one hand, you want to be able to win an election, like you need votes on both sides, right? But on the other hand, you also want to energize and actually do substantive change. So you have to, again, on one hand, play the defund the police game, right? And then on the other hand, you also have to, we still need police in society. And, so it does make an interesting dynamic, especially considering anything that Democrats run on, Republicans are going to weaponize.
I think that, do you think some of the leaders, passionate leaders that are out here crying and rallying for defunding the police are considering November?
I don't think so. I think that, defund in its literal sense means to zero the budget for. And I don't think that that's a winning strategy in November 2020, considering Republicans typically run on a more law and order, pro law enforcement platform. And saying that you're going to zero police budgets energizes law enforcement to vote for Republican candidates. And it suppresses potential support on the Democratic side, because you have suburban white women, suburban Black women, who don't want to live in a society where police aren't adequately funded. So, that's why I say it really becomes this nuanced dance.
And I think depending on your situation, like, no one wants to live in a society that police aren't adequately funded. But only it's the Black experience with the police is a singular experience for so many people, or the Black and brown experience is a very singular experience. And so for somebody that has had poor interactions with the police, I'm very sparing on when I would even call them. Knowing that they're there is something that I think is more so embedded in who I am and what I understand to be normal. And I think more people are going to probably err on the side of keeping them around. So I agree that the word defund is extremely dangerous right now, especially defund without explanation. In that same vein of kind of being tone deaf and with defunding the police and just where we have been with that, why is there such a messaging problem on more so the Democratic side with messages? And I know that one glaring reason is that the tent is huge, right? You're not just trying to reach one type of person. You have conservative people, and a lot of them ascribe to the same views, so they believe the same way, they vote the same way. And even if they don't believe everything, they believe enough to just get on message and get on brand. With on the other side, you have people that are just maybe not as conservative or maybe far left and like anti everything. And so with the messaging, not just with like defunding the police, but even with House Democrats coming out today in African garb, um, attempting to connect in some way, which even understanding, like just seeing that alone for me was enough to just make me cringe. Like, and understanding that the Congressional Black Caucus was instrumental in that performance. Um, the messaging problem to me is rounded. Like, there's a problem with messaging collectively. And how do we get ahead? Or is there a way, even looking from the outside in, if you don't ascribe or describe yourself as a Democrat, what would be the recommendation for them to do better or change that messaging, if that's even possible?
I think pandering has to stop being so obvious. I think, like you brought up a good point with conservatives, they just will vote in their interest of conservatism, correct? I think with Democrats, from what I've seen and noticed, and we can take this back to, when Hillary Clinton was running, there just always seems to be just a level of pandering to one specific group. And to me personally, that comes off as very disingenuous. And it makes me not want to give you my vote or believe in you, because I feel like you're only doing something because you know that you need this certain group of people to support you. And now, all of a sudden it becomes cool to appeal to them. But I don't think that was ever their true intention, or how what they believe deep down inside.
Right. Jeff, what do you think?
I think it's a two-way street, right? I think that there needs to be more engagement on the on our end as like people who aren't in elected office, because I think that that would have helped the CBC, and I think that would have helped Speaker Pelosi today, and to say maybe we shouldn't do the kente cloth. Maybe if you guys want to do something related to Black Lives Matter, that'd be great to stand in solidarity. But like the kente cloth is just comes off as a bit like pandering. On the other end, we also need their input in constructing reformative processes and messaging strategies like defund the police, because I'm sure Nancy Pelosi would have just came out and said defund is a bad idea. I flipped 40 House seats in November of 2018. I understand how to win districts. Defund is a bad word. So I think there has to be enough engagement on both ends, because I think both of us can use the help.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. And I think that the more that we see this type of behavior, and also because the tent is so large on the Democratic side, people that are one issue voters are also turned off by one issue. So one thing happens and then they just throw up their hands. If it's not their candidate, or one of their candidates, or the presumptive candidate says something that they don't like, it doesn't matter what it is. And the other side is not like that at all. I may not like that, I don't agree with that, but I agree with this, and I'm voting no matter what. And I think that speaks to just two different types of people. Going forward and kind of leaving that conversation, what type of responsibilities, and we'll leave it here after this, do we want to, like, is there a responsibility of Black leadership in this time? Like, all over all everywhere, you're getting mixed messages, right? So there are people that are, in some ways it's a little frustrating, but there are people that are Black Lives Matter, defund the police, Black Lives Matter, stop killing us, Black Lives Matter, so do white lives, all lives matter. And we have Black leadership all across the spectrum. If there was something, because often, like, we don't think about it this way, but whenever we're referenced by, whether it's the GOP or the press, they always talk about the Black agenda as if we are monolithic, but we are not. So if there was a call for Black leadership, or if there was not even a call, but something that you wanted to see from Black leaders that represent you, because so many times these Black leaders are just saying what is in their best interest for whatever their cause is or whatever organization they represent. But if you wanted to see Black leaders say something, what would that be, Jess?
I would want people to actually ask for, have a solution, because it's always really easy to talk about the problems and talk about the issues, but I would want Black leaders to actually come to the table with real solutions, with solutions that actually benefit the Black community and not just minorities, not just people of color, specifically Black people. That's what I would like to see an agenda, just specifically and candidly for Black people.
Jeff, what about you?
I agree. I think that a number of grassroots organizations that have sprouted up, over the past 15, 20 years. I mean, even within the past probably 6 or 7 days. And I think that they should probably be engaged with a larger kind of organization. So I'm going to use NAACP for argument's sake, in crafting what the actual Black agenda is, because I don't think we have a centralized agenda. You may mention that like we're not monolith in thought, but at least we can have these smaller tertiary groups help craft a larger message for us to kind of get behind. And I think that's what we're missing, is that you have, Black Lives Matter on the street, like literally painted on the street, and then you have people come behind that and add equal defund the police. And that's not necessarily reflective of the movement. And, if we had kind of like a larger agenda to get behind that was actually crafted and written down that people could reference, I think we'd be a lot better suited.
Yeah, and I think messaging is important. And just wrapping this, I think that even saw an article today that is probably circulating evangelical circles that says Christianity should not support Black Lives Matter. Now, that sounds like an extreme view. The article's out there. It's not something that I would post or something that I'm encouraging people to read. It's total bull, just from my own perspective. But I think knowing that messaging is out there and people kind of hold to their own views and their own version of whatever it is, their own version of politics, their own versions of religion, their own version of everything. And so I think that not that Black people need to be taught in some way, but we have to be unified, because while we may not be monolithic, our experiences in so many ways are tied together. And if we don't get on the same page, those will never change. So thank you so much for that. Switching gears a little bit, I'm going to bring Gerald into the conversation. And there's some other things that kind of went on that I want to talk about. And two social, we'll call them social issues that have sprung up over the last day. As I went to sleep yesterday, Terry Crews was trending for basically in a simplistic way saying that if we don't add white people to this fight for Black lives, we will create a Black supremacist society. That's it. Paraphrase. He said something more specific. I wish that he would have stopped tweeting, but he did continue. And he hasn't taken, this is not the first time that he's made segments like this. It's not the first time that he has kind of expressed where he is. I have my views on what he meant and why he said that and where that came from. But when you hear that from because fair, I believe that all three of you can have your own thoughts and you're free to think about this however you want. My first question to all three of you is, what is Black supremacy?
Like, how is that even possible?
That's I don't honestly. Terry Crews has been somebody that I've stopped paying attention to a while ago. So I don't know. I saw it on my timeline and I was like, what were we expecting from him? He's already shown us his true colors. So I don't know why we're all up in arms about him, especially him. But a clown is as a clown does, or a clown does whatever the saying is. I've had a few shots, but
it's when you do clownery, the clown comes back to life. Right? That's Monique. I know that one. Gerald, what is a Black supremacist?
Not me. Gosh, it doesn't exist as of right now. I could sit here and steer the conversation and say it's hard for me to be part of certain conversations where we say Black Lives Matter when we sort of have within our own community that level of superiority, or we feel like we're better than the next person, but that's something totally different. But as far as there being a Black version of white supremacy, he somebody just needs to hug him and hold him tight.
Actually, no, they don't. We need to push him far away.
No, but this is the thing, though. This is the thing. I just said it to my friend before I called. I was like, look, we need to be divisive with him. Like, you treat him like a roach, but you don't spray Raid, so he comes back. So I'm like, he does this time and time and again, and nobody ever says cancel him for good. They're just like, oh, you said this again. Like, he's done this with Gabrielle Union. He's done this with every time he speaks, he does this. Like, he doesn't love himself. He doesn't like black people.
I have some thoughts here, but I want to know, Jeff, your thoughts on Black supremacy, and then I'll kind of bring this into where I landed with it and where, I have some serious issues.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. Like, one, like, we don't have the relationship to power. Like, supremacy is about power inequity, and we are on the wrong side of that to ever be in a place in this society to be talking about Black supremacy. So that's number one. Number two, I want celebrities to stop taking cues from white people and other celebrities who do not have our lived experience, because those words are so irresponsible. Like, stop saying stupid stuff. If you don't know what to say, don't say nothing. Retweet somebody who's saying the right stuff, but it's just so frustrating.
You literally took the words out of my mouth and what I wanted to say, because to be supremacist, which is a lot of the, like, education is an imperative, right? And I know I'm not dragging celebrities that don't have education, which I believe that he does, but I think that your lived experience often is different. Elite celebrities complaining about white supremacy, their white supremacist experience, their lived experience is different than a common Black person that encounters it every single day. That said, which we know the reason that Black people can't be racist, because it has a superior complex attached to it. We are not superior. We don't have the ability to be superior. While we can be bigots and are, while we can be prejudiced at many times and are, we cannot inherently be racist at all. That said, there's no such thing as Black supremacy. It could not possibly be a thing. This reared its head again in a different way, and it's like celebrity after celebrity has something to say about it. Billy Porter releases a video today, and in it likened heterosexual Black people to white supremacists in their dealings with LGBTQ people, which I think that there's an argument about treatment there, definitely. Likening it to white supremacy is way off, because in no way are any of these Black people have the same lived experience. So they are not superior. They know that, but also the experience that I think for celebrities where it's really starting to frustrate me is they're trying to take the lead when it comes to voting, and they're tone deaf. Like Diddy rallying to withhold the Black vote until we get something. You withholding the Black vote means nothing. If you don't vote, whether you vote or not, Diddy is going to live the same life. That is not the same. He's not living the same experience as other people. So when celebrities kind of speak on this, they find themselves in really, really interesting places. I have a word for, I'm not going to say it tonight, but I have a word for celebrities that really, really have atonements for white people, and their relationships with white people often are more in numbers than their relationships with Black people. And because I believe that as a Black person, you have the right to speak your lived Black experience, I will never take away from it, but I will question the angle, because I think that when you make a statement that is inaccurate, both factually and just in historical context, it needs to be challenged and it needs to be checked. So Terry Crews is one thing, Billy Porter another. When you heard Billy Porter's comments today, Gerald, what were your thoughts?
I glossed over it. I was told about it, but I mean, that's a really weird. It's a hard comparison, but I get what he's saying, because let's be real. I'm going to say what nobody has. Black lives matter until you're gay, or Black lives matter until you're trans. That's a big problem with this movement, where we want to give off this air of solidarity that really isn't there, because honestly, we don't support each other the way that we should, and it leads into a lot of other problems. Like, literally, what did I see the other day? A guy told a young Black man on Twitter, he was gay. He told him, he's like, for Black Lives Matter. He's like, this is not your fight. He told them that Black Lives Matter has to do with straight males and straight females, which makes it.
But to that point, why do we take the words of one person and say that applies to all? Because one person has that perspective, but because Black Lives Matter may not mean gay Black Lives Matter or trans Black Lives Matter to this one person, why is that all of a sudden the default for everyone?
It's not, but I feel like we see it. It happens more often than we want to admit that it does. I think that it's something that needs to be addressed. I feel like because it's not being addressed, we can't move as one thing. I get what you're saying, but there are people who hurt and feel like they can't identify with a whole movement or community because they've been ostracized by that community their whole life. So you have this movement, and even when you want to hop on a bandwagon, somebody treats you like trash. And I've seen it like a lot of times, like in my city from where I'm from right now, people are not part of conversations because they choose to love somebody that looks like them. And so it's very hard for them to sit here and have a seat at this conversation because they don't feel comfortable. So it's not the voice of one. I really do feel like it's been the voice of many. It breaks my heart.
And to Gerald's point, Alex, I think, to ask the question of why is one person's opinion or voice, why does that become the default opinion? Like we're doing that. We do that with so many other issues. We have a couple people who feel one way and then that becomes the default. So it's valid what Gerald is feeling. What Billy Porter, why I can't speak to his experience and feeling like the oppression of cishet Black men and women towards gay people feels like white supremacy to him. I don't know what his lived experience is, and that it could very well feel like that. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is we have to stop looking to celebrities to make sense for all of us, right? Just as like we are not monolithic, like no celebrities don't speak for the mass of Black people. And then back to Terry Crews with Black supremacy, celebrities probably do feel like Black supremacy exists because they feel superior to the rest of us. Celebrities feel superior to the everyday person. And that's exactly why we can't look to them for leadership and we can't look to them to make sense for the rest of us. They are flawed people like you and I are. They just have more money and more people know them, but nothing else about them makes them thought leaders or makes them experts. Like they still have a lot of learning and unlearning to do as well. So that's why I get a little frustrated when we make such a big deal about what celebrities say and do, or when anything happens, we're looking to celebrities to say something and speak out. I don't really want them speaking out.
Oh, I have a question to that then.
And to your Gerald, I'll go to your question, but to your point, Jazz, Malcolm X literally, one of his most famous quotes is that celebrities are not Black leaders, and we are the only, and I think I don't know if that still applies today, but we are the only, his words, group of people that allow celebrities to dictate our thoughts and what we do and how we live and how we operate. And you don't see other communities doing that. So I think that's another conversation that we have to have. Again, we're not monolithic, but our experience is similar. We have to start having those conversations about like, why in the hell would Terry Crews dictate? From Terry Crews to Billy Porter to Michael Jordan, none of them really are going to dictate the way that I think about something. But for so many of our people, they do. Gerald, go ahead.
So my question to Jazz would be, if we're not looking to celebrities, which I don't look to anyway, who are we looking to? Because if we look amongst the people we've allowed people like D-Ray and Sean King to be a thing. Mm-hmm. And hell, I'll even add her name too. The one that just got that left the Real. We have
Amanda Seales.
Yeah, and we have her. She grinds my gears. So who do we look to then when we look towards a younger age, a younger group, and they're not doing us justice? Because Sean King is a mockery. Amanda Seales sometimes is all the way over here. Like I said, so who would you look to?
So that's a great question. I think that everybody, so humans as a species have this inherent desire to be led by something and someone, right? That's why religion is huge. That's why we're able to have politicians and things of that sort. And so I don't know that you need to find a leader more so than educate yourself and then find out what it is that you believe. And then if you want to find someone with a bigger voice or who is, more boisterous or more willing to get out there, who aligns with what you believe, then you can go and seek that person. But I'm not telling anybody that they need to find a leader for anything, because I think we are all flawed as people. So regardless of whoever you find, you might have 5 beliefs and they might align with 4 of those, but there's going to be one that they don't align with. And then, that leaves you kind of stuck because you put all of your belief behind this person. I don't think there's anything wrong with having leaders. I think that you must first educate yourself, though. And then if you decide to be led by somebody or a group of people, then that's on you. But you have to also be prepared to fail with them and give them grace when they mess up if you choose them to be your leader. But I don't think that you need to have one.
A perspective. I think that I think in some ways, I think in my viewpoint, people seek leaders and they seek leadership just because they and not to be insulting, but they just don't do life essentials. So maybe they don't read or they don't.
People want to be led. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. People want to be led by something, and that's completely understandable. Like, the world is hard to navigate alone. Well, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the desire to be led. I'm just not telling you that that's what you need to do.
Sure. Jeff, what do you think?
I think that like we have to. I'm in total agreement with like celebrities to shut up, because like you're just famous. Like, you're not necessarily a thought leader on a particular subject matter. So like, it's unfortunate that like a person with 1.5 million followers can decide that they dislike a particular restaurant or decide that they dislike a particular political candidate, and they can shape an entire conversation around that. Like, I think that could be a bit unfortunate in some situations, but it is the reality that we live in. I think that people not celebrity people, like regular people, have to do a better job of just crafting their circles and crafting the content that they're taking in. Like, I think a lot of times we go into I personally have tried to do a better job of just like my Twitter timeline of just having dissenting voices so that I can understand what they are saying on Fox News and what are they saying on MSNBC, or like what are other people's take on a particular topic, because that makes me better equipped to speak on something or be better informed on a particular topic. I think we all can, do a better job of that.
I actually agree with that, and I wasn't headed in this direction, but that leads me to the conversations, like, and kind of going back to steering and navigating and really helping people connect with issues and with ways to remediate issues. And I think one of the reasons that we find ourselves behind or playing catch up, and not aside from the systemic reasons that we are really right now fighting about, but I think that if we don't start having conversations about expanding our thought and embracing, I agree with you, Jeff, thoughts that we don't agree with, but also having conversations with people that we don't agree with. I'm not telling you to go befriend a racist or a white supremacist, but I think that oftentimes conversation, and I found that myself, a conversation really kind of can change your train of thought. It can train your plans. It can also kind of train the decisions that you make. So I think it's always important to expand that. Last words on this, Jazz, go ahead.
Last words on what?
Just how we, not just leadership, but how we embrace I guess I should have asked a question there, right? How we make a conscious effort to not just, because if you're not going to choose a leader, I think being a leader is something that we have to choose to be individually. And I'm not putting a responsibility on you to go lead a masses of people, but I think that some of us really have a social and a moral responsibility to be leaders just in thought, like not telling people what to do or how to do it, but encouraging people to do things that are going to help enhance themselves. So like, I don't know what you should do. You're asking me for advice on this. I don't know. But I read this book, or I watched this YouTube video, or I listened to this TED Talk, or I listened to this, and just suggesting things. Because sometimes just a suggestion will kind of change that landscape. Is there anything that you would offer? And here's my question, Jazz, to people in need or not in need, on how to kind of navigate these waters and make decisions when they don't, because a lot of times people don't vote, they don't make decisions on anything because they don't have the resources to do so. So how would you navigate that?
That's a loaded question. I think the way that, again, educating yourself is the most important thing. And I'm not talking about becoming an academic or going to school, but just there are basic things that we should all know about, our rights and as it pertains to voting and just everyday things that we depend on other people to tell us. And that's why we can kind of be led astray, because we're depending on somebody else to kind of feed us information. And once you go out and seek your own knowledge and seek your own understanding, you will just find that you maybe don't agree with a lot of the things that you were conditioned to believe in. So finding and researching things for yourself, just becoming an individual. And like I said, I know it's so, being led is the easier thing because it's really hard to navigate the world, especially as a Black person on your own. But you also, we're living in a time where popularity kind of trumps someone who's actually a thought leader or an expert or who really has your best interest. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about leaders, we just talk about people who are more popular than somebody else. And that's not really a leader. If you're continuing to find yourself disagreeing with someone that you've held up as a leader, that person is not the person that should be leading you. So you have to find people who align with your best interests. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. And the biggest thing I can say is be selfish and find people who align with your self-interest. What is it that you want for yourself? Not what your parents want, not what you think the masses want, but what do you want for yourself? And then seek people or seek education and understanding for the things that you actually believe in.
Very cool. Thank you, Jazz. I think we'll leave that one there. I think I got to move on and just talk about some other things that happened. But Jazz, as always, please always come back. Jeff, thank you for being here. Come back, and because I think this conversation, and like I said, it will change, and the conversation and what we're seeing even happening, like there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening this week and a lot of stagnant things that are happening this week that we will still need to discuss. So as time permits and the schedule permits, I will bring you all back because these conversations are important. And again, this conversation, if you're missing it now, you can't stay for the entire thing. It's available on the Unmuted Nation podcast, which will be, you can download it anywhere a podcast is available. And also this show is usually live at 1 p.m. Eastern in the Boss FM app. Switching gears a little bit, there are people in this country that are holding on to things that A, are very treasonous, and B, have no place in the country. And many of you live in states. I once lived in a state that cherishes a heritage that was in total opposition to this country. Now, I see a Confederate monument and it makes me cringe. I think about the hate that's associated with it. But what I learned as a child from a lot of people who had grandparents that fought in the Confederate Army and things like that is that people claim to hold on to it because of their heritage. As we continue this conversation, there were some monumental things that happened in the country, monuments and statues that have been erected in cities and states, and even other countries have been torn down and demolished. I, for one, can't be more excited about that. I rejoice. I'm excited. Antez Williams is here to discuss some of these monuments being torn down. And when you think, and this is the thing that I like. Let's see if I can just summarize this. And Gerald, while you're still here, when you see the Confederate flag, because I think that I always hear white people say, well, this is my heritage and this is my grandfather. My grandfather your grandfather was a treasonist and a con and a crook. and he should have been jailed. And you know, worse things happened to slaves that ran away. So when you see the Confederate flag, and Tess, what's the first thing that goes through your mind?
It's just a symbol of racism is what it is, and it is it tells me that you're okay with that. You know, if I'm driving, you know, down the street and there's a pickup truck with a Confederate flag bumper sticker on it, and I'm a black man, well, what am I to think? You know, what am I to think?
Well,
what if
about
I get
it?
in?
I mean, that's always the question from the other side. What about the flag itself makes you feel like that's a racist driving the truck?
Well, here's the thing. So you got to go back to the history of that flag. So, you know, those people fought for that flag, and those people fought in the Civil War because they wanted to keep their slaves. That's a part of what that flag stood for. So to me, to just bring it all down, what that says to me is you're not okay with black people being free, and I'm black. So you have an issue with me innately. So you are already opposed to me. And if they don't know that's what that means, I can't forgive your ignorance either.
I mean, I think historical context really comes into play here, right? If the statues and the monuments, for the most part, have been erected since the Civil War, and they have been up since then, that would be one thing. But the majority of them that are erected in this country were erected during the Jim Crow era, during a time that this country was intent on keeping black people down. So I think a lot of them don't even know that history. Gerald, when you see a Confederate flag, what is your immediate thought?
Just another day in the neighborhood. I'm from DC. I could go literally reach my hand over and bring you one right now. Because for those of you who are listening from DC and know Alexandria, Virginia, is right up the street, and it's known as Old Town. It was part of everything that was going on. So we actually have statues that were erected during that era. So to see the flags and see the statues, it makes me sad that people actually can still carry them, that they still align with those beliefs. It doesn't trigger me the way that it may do other people, because the way we were educated on it. Like, I'm just like, you know what, there's some people who are just stuck. And they, like I said, right now I could walk across the street, across the bridge, and they're still, I just shake my head because they're dumb.
Is it something that a culture that you embrace? Like if you were, I don't know, dating somebody that had a Confederate heritage, would you be okay with that in your home?
Okay. As in, and Tez is like, yeah. So they are not embracing their Confederate heritage, right? They just have Confederate heritage. Like, you just messed me up real bad.
I mean, I was just asking the question because you made it like it's something normal. It's normal. You're fine with it. You can go and grab one from the corner. So I'm like, how much are you embracing it? Because I think there's a miscommunication oftentimes, and sometimes people are just racist. You are a damn racist, and they don't want to accept the fact that you are a damn racist. Your family's a whole damn racist. You come from a lineage of racists. Y'all are racist people. That is a hard word that people try to define themselves. But the problem is, just like in this country that you can't define your news, you can't say something is fake news because you disagree with it. You can't say something is not racist because you disagree with it. So if it's racist, you are racist. And I think that there's not we haven't called it like we see it in so many ways. We pacify and we say this is just enough, and it doesn't really offend me if it does. And I think that we, in some ways, that's where I will say you will never hear me say that black people are part of the problem. But I think in pacification and acceptance, and so many times we have said, oh, well, no, it doesn't really bother me if it's there. If it does, it does. You should say that it does. It's a problem. I don't want to see it. And in so many ways, I think I sat in, and we've all seen the Raven video going around where she's just giggling and her mouth is stuck with peanut butter or something like that. My mouth wasn't stuck, but I giggled and giggled and giggled. And I thought it was hilarious that as I saw these statues of these racist people, and the more that you learn about it, the more painful that it becomes. But I think in line with that, like in not calling things out there, when we think about like falsehoods and when we see BS, and sometimes it's like, I know we work for these corporations or we have relationships with that we don't necessarily want to mess up our money. And I do understand. I'm not going to talk about celebrities that could have spoken in 1988 when they had the platform to, all of the White Housewives, and now they want to hold forums on eradicating racism and what do we want. I'm not going to talk about that, but what I will say is that there are conversations that we can have, and we have to be honest first as a body of people if we're demanding people to denounce things that they have clung to and that they cling to. And so in that same line, it's like the Confederate flag, people don't want to accept racism. Now we have organizations left and right, and it is just, I really am not really here for the trend of Black Lives Mattering. In so many ways, Black lives are mattering because corporations are making them matter. Your CEOs are sending out global emails to the company like Black Lives Matter. But Black lives have been here. If they matter, they mattered last year. They mattered 4 years ago. And so when I see things like, great example coming to my mind, the NFL, Roger Goodell releases this video. He looked like he was being held hostage when he released this video saying that he was wrong and he apologizes, but to who? And you believe that Black Lives Matter. Do you believe that? Or are Black people starting to mess with your money? Like, I have so many questions that I feel like our message is diluted. And I guess going back to this, I didn't really believe that, like, we're not monolithic, but I'm starting to believe, and I'm evolving during the show, that doesn't happen often, that we got to get our messaging right, because it is just it's a mess. The messaging is a mess. Like, for those people that are now hugging the football players, and thank you for now realizing that Black Lives Matter. They knew that Black Lives Matter 4 years ago. They knew that. If your Black ass played for playing and you just didn't want to do what Colin was doing because you didn't want to mess up your money, you things I don't want to be inflammatory or flagrant or really be like drop a bunch of expletives tonight just because I feel like you would get my point either way. You know that's some bullshit. They know it's some bullshit. We don't want it. So it's Roger Goodell, it's the football players, it's the corporations. Everybody's coming out. Everybody wants a hug. We're hugging police officers. What type of message are we sending about what we actually want? Like, what is hugging and dancing and doing the electric slide with police officers? How is that? Like, when you get done doing that next week, if they catch you and the camera is off and there's no music playing, your ass is still Black. So what are we doing here?
That's not everybody though, Alex. Like,
so here's what I will say. And I had a small conversation about this earlier today because I'm seeing a lot of money being thrown around, and I'm seeing a lot of companies saying they're giving $10 million and $100 million and $50 million and all of these millions of dollars to these organizations, which is great. However, I think we have to hold those people accountable, and then also understand that this just happened. Not that it just happened as in it hasn't been happening, but we've never got to this place where we're having these types of conversations. So I want to give those people
they have never gotten to the point where they're having these conversations,
and that's fine.
These conversations over and over, and the problem could be that we're having the conversations with the wrong people. We're having the conversations with people that haven't moved anything forward. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm like, we've been having these conversations.
That's true. And here's the thing. Now, with these protests now almost a week and a half or however long they've been going on, companies are now starting to say, okay, if not necessarily we hear you, but we're going to put money behind whatever we say. Like, I want to give them an opportunity to put their money where their mouth is and to actually to actually fulfill the things that they say that they're going to do, and give them a little minute, a couple of months or whatever. Okay, so you donate the $100 million. Okay, well, where is that money going? If that money is going to the NAACP, then what is the NAACP doing? And what are these other organizations that they're donating all of these funds to? Because if it's just going to coat the pockets of the chair people and the people that are on the board, then that doesn't really do anything for the community. And then we just have more of the same issue that we had before. Amen. So here again, this whole George Floyd thing, and that's kind of what I'm talking about specifically with the protests and the unrest and all that other kind of stuff. That's great. Make the noise, burn down all the buildings. But if they want to invest into the community, let's give them the opportunity to invest in the community now. If we look back in a year or 6 months down the line and nothing's changed, then we need to start pulling those coattails and say, well, what are you doing? Because a couple months ago you said X, Y, and Z, and it was supposed to inflict this type of change, but the checkbook isn't saying that, or the dollar amount that you said was supposed to go to whatever initiative did not get there. So that's when we have to call them on the carpet.
I think that's a good point. I think that's an interesting perspective, and I think a lot of people are right there. I think a lot of people are ready to say, okay, we're going to back up corporations. Come on and show us the pocketbooks. Show us what you can do. Show us what you're going to do. On the flip side, this lip service has been happening for years. Like, they have said, we will help, we will change, we will train. So when do we get tired? When? Because why would they believe that they really need to do anything? And I'm gonna use this example. We talked about, and I gotta go. So we can continue this tomorrow if y'all want to come back. I'm open to it because we're out of time. But when we say defund the police, and then we saw like the mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti, said he's gonna give $150 million. Everything is in the reporting. They're like, oh, he's giving a huge chunk of change to Black lives and to educational programs and all of these things, $150 million. When the police budget is $3 billion. In the grand scheme of things, like, that was just a drop in the bucket. That $150 million was what they could cut, probably that what they were spending on, silverware. I don't know. But I think that if you're going to show me a change and show me that you care, and it's the same thing, and we're definitely going to hit this tomorrow because it's something that I'm really stop pacifying us. Stop pacifying us. Do not continue like this right here. Do not no. Stop pacifying us. Stop saying that I'm going to create a diversity and inclusion role, or we're going to create something for you to have a seat at the table. No, give me the seat at the table if we're going to actually change the system. Otherwise, stop inhibiting us from creating our own table. And that's what, if you look at history and what has happened, anytime the Black community has started to create their own, from Black Wall Street to Black economies, it has been dismantled by white people. This is a conversation that is uncomfortable to have, but it's one we will continue to have. And with that, I really want you two back for that conversation tomorrow because I really got to go.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think and we couldn't get there today, but it's a collective conversation that we have to keep happening. We're going to keep marching. People are going to still be marching. People are going to be out there. But what are we going to do to change the narrative? Like, how do we change the system? And that's the conversation that we are not having. The conversation that we are not having is how to change the system, when to change the system. And we're done having the conversation on why the system needs to change. I think we're done. I'm done. And this show is done. We
gotta hold them accountable. I think it just comes down to, we just gotta hold them accountable. I don't have a problem with holding them accountable. I don't have a problem with saying, okay, so you donated $100 million to the NAACP. Well, where did that money go? And how does it trickle down to it including me in that number? Because if it doesn't, then what did we do? So
it doesn't. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. You'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here at Unmuted Nation. Of course, typically we're on 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific in the Boss FM app. Listen to Boss FM Talk. More information at unmutednation.com. I'm out of here. I'm back here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. We do this again. And Tez, Gerald, please come back. Unmuted Nation is out of here. I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, today's greater. Believe it, speak it, live it.